Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Productivity Mastery, episode 71. My name is Stoyan, and I'm a productivity and performance coach on a mission to bring you some of the best leaders on the planet, the most effective, the most caring, and hopefully together we can explore how they're doing things and get inspired from it. And today I'm very privileged and honored to be here with one leader that's not just making a profound difference to the planet with what she does, but she's such an example and inspiration for me personally. And I can't wait to start the show. Kate, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. The sun is shining, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Same here, same here. So why don't you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background, what brought you to 1% for the planet, and what is your focus today?
Sure. So I'm Kate Williams. I'm CEO of 1% for the Planet, which is a global network of companies and individuals who are committing to give back their 1%. It's a really amazing model. We've certified about 30 million giving in annually the last couple of years, and getting close to about 300 million in total giving over the lifetime of our organization. And that's all these members who are doing their 1%. So it's a really powerful model that brings together companies of all sizes in many different sectors. So it's great. I love it. And we have a team that's based in the US, both in our headquarters in Vermont and also remotely in other locations around the country. So we're a pretty remote organization that has a headquarters office. And I found my way here through, honestly, like both planning and serendipity. So I started my career as an outdoor educator and then moved into the environmental nonprofit space. And kind of thread for me throughout all of that was, leadership and sort of how do you organize people and bring people together to get somewhere. In the case of outdoor education, it was often like physically, like how do we get from point A to point B on the map? But in an organization, it's, how do we get to our vision of what we want to accomplish in the world? And, a lot of it is the same. And still, that's the good problem that I'm always trying to figure out of like, how do you do that well? And how do you do that in ways that move us forward?
So what was the point of no return? Probably the people from 1% for the planet reached you and they were like, hey, Kate, let's explore this opportunity. What was this thing that really made you to take a decision and become a CEO of organization?
I mean, in a way it was that I didn't want it, that I said no to it first. So the story behind that is that I had been the executive director of another nonprofit for about 10 years and was ready for a change, and moved over to 1% for the Planet as a director of partnerships. And, kind of at that point was sort of feeling a little bit burnt out by leading an organization, and thought, well, maybe I want to sort of focus on like program area expertise as opposed to running the whole show. And so I did that for that first year, during which time the then CEO of 1% for the Planet left. And I was sort of ambivalent about whether I wanted to be CEO, but then it was good to sort of have that time to step back, because after a little while, I realized it was like kind of constitutionally hard for me not to be involved in the like strategy level, not to be kind of working at that level. So once I kind of got my feet back under me after, I think being a little burnt out from the prior job, as awesome as it was a lot. I realized like, I think it's hard for me not to kind of think and act and operate in a kind of leadership capacity. I just, to be kind of one, an individual operator as opposed to sort of having a role of pulling the team together. So, I started thinking about that, but there was a great internal candidate at that time for the job, and I supported him. And so I talked to the board and I said, look, if you're invested in this, moving this guy forward, I don't want to get in the way of that. So, let me know. And so they actually said they were. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to put my hat in the ring. And so I didn't, and I just kept on doing my job. And then one thing led to another, and for a variety of reasons, and there was sort of an end game in which that other person was, ended up not taking the job, and they offered it to me, and I at that point took it, and so it happened quite quickly at the end, but it was like such a great lesson for me, and just kind of being clear about what I wanted, but also integrity. I didn't want to kind of grapple for the position if it meant if it just wasn't the right time. So when it came down to it, I was super psyched and stepped into the opportunity, and then the real work began.
So could you maybe give us a bit of a context? How big is the organization? How many people do you have to lead?
Yep. We have 22 staff members at this point, and we're hiring. So we'll probably be closer to 25, 26 by the end of this year. When I started, we had, I think, 11, 12, something like that. So, we have grown quite a bit. We have 5,000 members all over the world. We do have a France chapter, so we have some staff in France, and I serve on that board. So it's a slightly different reporting relationship, but we do have that. And then we have a board of 14 at this point.
There's so many stakeholders from what I hear, from the environmental organizations to the people who are supporting the causes, from board members, and so many people are involved. So I'm really curious to hear, how does the day of Kate Williams look like? Is there one day that looks like the other, or every day is completely different?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up actually the other stakeholder group of our nonprofits, who are the ones who are on the ground making it all happen. So you're absolutely right to call that out. I would say, 2 years ago, if you had asked me a day in the life, I'd be like, there is no such thing. I'd say this past 18 months, it's been a little bit more similar. But regardless, the big difference being travel. Like, I'm not traveling anymore at this point. I mean, it will happen again. Great. And it's starting again. But the common thread is I'm basically connecting with those stakeholders all day long, every day. So, whether it's my staff members, whether it's sort of accounts or donors or members or nonprofits with whom I have connections, or board members, like pretty much all day, every day, I'm on now Zoom calls. When I travel, that's, a little more meetings in person. And I don't feel like, I don't get Zoom fatigue, actually. I mean, I find the ability to connect online to work really well for me, and it's worked really well for our organization. I mean, there are times when I'm like, okay, can I have a break, please? I need to go get food or whatever. But I actually really, get a lot of energy from it. Again, as you and I were talking about vacations a little bit earlier, like I love what I do, and I'm really honored, and I feel a huge sense of responsibility. So if I can connect with a member or a staff member, or, any one of our different stakeholders to help kind of move us forward and make us stronger, that feels pretty energizing. So
I love that you brought this up, that when you're so excited about what you do, when you're so passionate about what you do, working on vacation is not really working, right? It's just, you're doing something that you love in some ways, and you're contributing to something, and you don't want to be the bottleneck to the stakeholders or anybody else. It just feels right. And I want you to maybe talk a little bit about this, the importance of, obviously you guys are impact organizations, but I think this could be a good reminder for any type of organization, be it the tech startup, be the corporate working for profit. What's the importance of having a strong mission, strong purpose in your perspective?
Yeah, it's a really important question, which has, I think, a bunch of different levels. One level, what's important is it's really energizing. You feel, a high degree of sort of motivation and purpose. And, for people to feel purpose in what they're doing is, we're humans. It's about meaning for us, so to have work that gives us meaning and to feel like we're, contributing is really important. That's the bright side of it. The shadow side is, that can lead you to kind of never figuring out how to recharge and, focus on, other things. And so I am very mindful of that. And someone quoted to me someone else, so I'm going to not attribute this correctly. So whoever said this out there, I appreciate it. And just, don't remember who was attributed to him, but you can't, burnt out person can't save a burning planet. And, since the world that, the area that we're working in is the environment, that really resonated for me. And so I'm very mindful, particularly in terms of like the example I set for my staff, because for me, actually, like if I wake up early on a Saturday morning and I've got like a burning idea, it's like de-stressing to sit down and like write it out or, something like that. But I have to be really careful that I'm really explicit. Like, I don't expect my team to feel like they have to do that. It's not a like, you must work all the time kind of vibe. It's more, I'm a huge proponent of flex time. Like, if what works for you and your family is that you work some at night and have some time off in the middle of the day when your kids are awake and whatever, that's awesome if you can get your job done. But what it means is that you might be sending emails or whatever at a different time than someone else is working. And so we have to be really, really mindful of the fact that, other people don't feel sort of implicit pressure of like, oh, wait, they're working at night, I should be too. And it's like, no, that's not what this is. That's not a like stay up till midnight working every night. It's a what works with your life. So I'm a big proponent of that. And I love my job and having a purpose, so back to that, like having a purpose and my staff having a purpose. I know they feel a lot of pride and responsibility in what they're doing. But again, too, it can be the shadow side. It can be a little bit harder to, unplug or sort of say, okay, I got to draw the line here to, to tend to, this other thing in my life. And so, it's really important to balance that.
I really love that you brought this up, that on the one side, for leaders out there who are really passionate about what they do, to really be more mindful about their own self-care and to be able to recharge, but also to be mindful that their team might follow their example, right? Like you might be working in the weekend, they see that stuff is going on and it's like, oh my God, I need to do stuff as well. And just to have this conversation and say, hey, you're not supposed to. Sure, if you're super fired up, get something done, but hey, it's your holiday. Go have a holiday with your family.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great point. What I'm curious to hear from you, Kate, is how do you define, do you have any kind of method or tool you use in order to define the strategic objectives? On the one side to define them, and on the other side to communicate them effectively so everybody from the team is on the same page where we are going and what has to get done.
Yeah, we've put a lot of work into that over the last couple of years. And I feel really psyched. We still have progress to make as always, but we've made a lot of progress. We have a really good process and product on that front at this point. So 2 years ago in 2019, we worked with a member, a guy named Will Ditzler, who's a member of 1% for the Planet, and he donated his time to do what his business is, which is provide strategic planning support. And he has a great approach and uses the scaling up model, which is, there's a book called Scaling Up, which is awesome. I highly recommend it. And, basically we went through a year and got stakeholder input, staff input, board input, had, some pretty long, thoughtful digging into all the details meetings. And then the end result was a one-page plan. It's literally it was an Excel sheet. We've now moved it to a Google worksheet, but it's one page that has everything from our core values to our annual KPIs on it. So it's our core values, our purpose, our North Star. So where we're headed, our 3 to 5 year kind of midterm goals, our 1 year goals, and then our quarterly tracking toward those 1 year goals. And then what we have done is we've used that one page plan and the annual KPIs, we build our annual work plan around those KPIs. So again, we're still working on like how to knit it all together, but in staff meetings and board meetings, the way we report our progress all goes back to that one-page plan. So really, really awesome tool. And, I was not the one who came up with it, so I can like sing its praises, because to have all of our kind of core strategy captured in this one page, so we can easily point everyone to it on a regular basis. And then, this is where we're continuing to sort of, figure out how do we best do this, but to have every staff member every day knowing that the work that they're doing ladders up to this KPI or that KPI. And so then everyone knows how it flows through to the strategy.
How long does it take for you and the other executives and the board members to actually nail this one pager?
We took, it was a year-long process of getting there, but not, so we dedicated 2 board meetings to it. So 2 full-day board meetings, a few staff meetings. So it's definitely a time investment for sure. But I don't know of any strategic planning process that doesn't have that time investment. But what's amazing is now with that in place, on an annual basis, basically the way the plan works is from left to right. The information on the left is super durable, so that like our core values, we're not changing those every year. Our core purpose, we're not changing that every year. That's the stuff that we, put a lot of time into, and now it's like a foundation stone. So really then it's just that annual process of saying, okay, do we need to rethink any of our midterm 3 to 5 year plans? So essentially it's like we do it through our annual work plan and budgeting process. So it's, once you create it, I've found it to be really efficient, and you always know it's not like you're going off on some tangent. You're always sort of having this framework that helps you're on the right trajectory. Or if you feel like you're kind of hitting obstacles, you can say like, okay, like what do we need to revisit? What might we need to give some more time to? So it served us really, really well.
We previously, you and me, Kate, had a conversation about the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, one of the co-authors of the one thing, Jay Papasan, was a guest to the show. A great episode, by the way. Those of you who are listening, you got to go check out the episode with Jay Papasan. Amazing episode. That guy is just mind-blowing. But one thing I remember from our conversation, and I'm curious to hear from you, what did you say here, is he also shared the system that they're teaching other organizations, which is the GPS system. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but a great system. It's also a one-page business plan, probably similar to what you discussed. But what he said is protecting your commitments is the hardest part of the journey. It's one thing to come up with a plan, which is really, really important. Those of you who are listening, if you don't have clarity right now, if you're a startup founder, if you're leading a bigger organization, if you're not clear what are the priorities, this is the first step, obviously. Take the time, prioritize, and be clear what are the core priorities, the core objectives. But then from there, Kate, how do you as a leader, and I know it's a very hard question, but how do you make sure that you stay on track, you stay focused on these core priorities and objectives that you set?
That is like the most important question for all of us. I mean, truly, like, because you can have a beautiful plan, it can be a really great plan, it can all fit on one page, but then if you go over here and like spend your days doing other things, it doesn't mean anything. So what I do, and it's always like, I have to stay on top of it, is I do look at that plan monthly. And then again, as I said, our work plan, which we have in a project planning platform called monday.com, is built around the annual KPIs. So, I then sort of take that and, where my name is, I'm a sort of combo, like write notes, and then I use an app called Things. Just that what works for me. So I can sort of allocate, like, what do I need to do this week? And I do use that question from the one thing, what do I need to do such that everything else is easier or no longer necessary? And I think about that in terms of so that stuff on other people's plates is easier. Because for the most part, like a lot of times the stuff that I'm doing is going to remove a log jam or create the passageway for other people to do the jobs that they need to do. So I try and think, figure out what are the things that I need to do that create the pathway for others to do the strategic work. And so I create my like 10 priorities for the week. And some of them are like standard, like always there, like planning for my direct check-ins, like good agendas and things like that. So making sure I'm always like making clear, like that takes time. I need to do that. And then, what from the, list of our sort of KPIs and work plan are the things that I need to do in a given week. My biggest challenge, you were asking about a day in the life. My biggest challenge is that I could quite literally be on calls that would be like productive and valuable calls with stakeholders from 8 to 6 or more, like every single solitary day. So one thing that I have done and that I'm like better or worse at protecting, and I really do think of it as physically, like I need to practically throw elbows. And I have recently gotten better again because I kind of slid a little bit this spring and, we all paid the price, is I block off Fridays for almost all meetings. Like I'll occasionally schedule stuff on Fridays, but I was basically feeling like I'd get through the week, I'd accumulate things that I needed to do. I had identified things I needed to do, and then the week would end and I would have had no time to do any of them. So protecting Fridays and protecting a few other blocks during the week has been really helpful, and just being like super disciplined about like, nope, sorry, like I know that looks, and I've blocked it on my calendar and say, do not schedule, you have to ask me first and things like that. And still people, sometimes understandably, because the rest of my schedule is full, will try and schedule. So, I really, I'm trying to be better about blocking that. And then the other, thing I've done is like for external meetings that are, more like, not sure if this is valuable, but, I would say like, I don't know, 5 out of 10 external meetings that I have are super valuable. So it's definitely worthwhile for me to have them, but I've like constrained the amount of time and created a separate schedule for those. So, I have a calendar, can send people the link, they can schedule it. And if they have to wait a month, they have to wait a month, and just like getting more at peace with that. So I think the clarity of prioritizing, making sure it's tied to the strategic plan, and then being like assertive about my calendar management, which is the hardest part for me. But I'm getting better at that because it benefits everyone.
Yeah, it's easy to get into the slippery slope of saying yes to things.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs your attention. Your team needs your attention. All the stakeholders needs the attention. There are so many things to be done. But if you say yes to everything, we actually interviewed over 50 founders, leaders for our book. Recently, our book came out. One of them is Steli Efti, the CEO of Close.com. And I asked him, Steli, how do you manage to stay focused, to stay productive? What he said was, my biggest productivity tool is saying no. I need to say no to 99 things so I can say yes to the one thing that really matters. And it's hard sometimes, right? It's really hard. But as you said, if we manage to create a discipline to block time for the important things, whatever that is for you, could be the mornings, like Jay Papasan suggests, block your morning for doing the one thing, then the afternoons, you can do some meetings, you can do some operational things, but what is the one thing? Or if you go to Brian Tracy, what is your frog? Eating your frogs in the morning. Whatever your morning is, some people are waking up and start working late. As you said, some people have different habits. But if it's your morning, hey, let me block 2 hours. Let me focus on finishing this contract, on having this important conversation with this stakeholder, which is proactive instead of reactive. But it's hard. It's really hard.
It is hard. And I would say as a global network, for me, the challenge is, there's a lot of stuff that comes in that an immediate no would be a mistake. Like I have to allow in enough that that there's space for like the connections that do help us move things forward. But so again, for me, the key was constraining the amount of time I allocate to that. And then, like kind of being clear, like if you can find something, great. And then I never sort of worry about like, oh, I shouldn't have scheduled that, because it's like, oh, that's all right. Like it's given the amount of time that it needs. So
how do you manage decision fatigue? Because I think one of the things that I've been struggling with at points is, I plan my day, everything is well planned, some new things come in. So, but at some point, I just feel this decision fatigue. If I say yes to many things, or maybe to many things, then I need to think and take a decision about it, which is exhausting my creative energy. So I'm curious, what do you do to protect your decision making energy, so to say?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't feel like I get decision fatigue. I think what I feel like is the decision piece that I think about a lot is trying to be really clear about where should this decision get made and when does it need to get made. I think where the fatigue can come in is if there's a feeling of like, oh, it's a decision, I got to make it now, which is sometimes true, but it's not always true. And so for me, I think, one of the things that is, again, always work in progress, but that I'm working on and that my leadership team and I are working on is like trying to be really clear about who has decision rights, who needs to be consulted, when does this need to be made. And let's like, some things are urgent, some things just feel urgent, but they're actually not. And we can say like, you know what, that's going to take, that needs to go like 2 months out, but we're going to hit the deadline. So that's one of the things we're really working on is like things out, being clear about like, this one actually needs to happen right away. That one, we may want it to, but it actually doesn't need to. So let's give that more time and then let's nail it when the time comes. So I think that's for me, the decision piece. I would say what a challenge that maybe causes more fatigue is like the mental tracking. And what I mean by that is like, every day there's so many things that like, okay, we're going to put that off for 2 months. We're going to, that we need to deal with. You're going to handle that. And, we document all of this, but still like there's a lot of that. So having good systems and good follow through to be able to know that all of those things are being tracked and completed. And, for a scaling organization, you shift from, being able to kind of have your arms around that and like have a pretty good sense of that to like, I can't like keep track of all of that, and shouldn't, like, that's not a good use of my brain power. So how to make sure that the things we've committed to are happening in the right places and that all of the kind of loops are getting closed along the way. I would say that's where I will sometimes feel fatigue. So I'll be like, where do we leave that? Is that where it should be? Do I need to check on that? So those really trying to build the systems up front so that you don't have to keep those loops running and using energy.
Super interesting. A few points here, but one of them is the importance to actually prioritize these conversations and this creating this structure. We do a lot of workshops around productivity, around culture in organizations, and initially this area that we call roles and responsibilities was something we added to, the book is called Perform, and R stands for roles and responsibilities. Basically, we were looking for R, right? Like all the other letters were spot on. Let's put roles and responsibilities. Yeah, but who wants to talk about that? Everybody knows this. Then we started doing workshops. We started doing coaching with different organizations. It turns out this is the one that, because it's so easy, because it's so intuitive, it usually gets neglected. And people are like, man, these discussions around the roles and responsibilities, that was amazing, completely turned our efficiency around. We're so clear right now. And we started like, wow, it's not that people don't have the tools and the methods. It's, like you mentioned, consulted, there's those Racy, Darcy, there's so many methods, right? You can find them online. But people, organizations, sometimes being really busy, forget to to prioritize this and to have these conversations and say, hey, you're accountable, I'm responsible, you take the decision, please keep Maria in the loop. And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's so important. And I would say you never are totally there on that one. You have to keep doing that, because in any decision, so if you're feeling that decision fatigue, or like if you're acknowledging like, okay, this is a decision that needs to be made, you have to have that clarity around like, we talk about in terms of decision rights, who's got decision rights, when are you gonna bring back a recommendation, who else needs to be involved, all of that it's just so important to always be mapping that out and getting input on that, and and then determining in some cases like, well, this is an urgent one, we just need to make the decision and move forward. So yeah, so important.
And the other point that you've made, and I think it's a trait of every effective leader, is to take this proactive approach. As you said, when some new information, new data come in, and somebody demands your attention or demands you to take a decision, not to react immediately, but really to say, do I need to take a decision now? Is it me who needs to take the decision, really? Yes, I can take the decision now, and it's probably going to save a bit of time in the short term. But is that something that actually somebody from the team is accountable for? They need to take a decision on? And really, is it something I need to do now? Because usually people, idea comes to mind, they send you an email, they send you a Slack message, they just want to get it out of their head. It doesn't mean you need to take the decision now. It might need that they need it by a week. So just creating this space between you and the decision, I think such a great point, Kate. Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Kate, another thing I wanted to ask you, which is also connected to productivity, and it's you as a leader. I think many leaders are trying to find the sweet spot, the right balance between how much time should I spend on getting things done, strategizing, doing my things, as operationally getting things done, as opposed to focusing on the team, coaching the team, being there for them, defining their priorities. So how do you find your own balance in between these two?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, all of these questions are so good. I feel like the most important thing that I can do is create the conditions for every person on my team to be like wildly successful in their jobs, and in their roles, and with their particular responsibilities. So a lot of time that in order to do that, that's like direct like coaching, follow up on our check-ins, weekly check-ins with all my direct reports, creating the structure for our management team to meet, and all of that. Like that feels like that's a hugely important way that I can set everyone else up to be wildly successful, and thus our organization to be its best self. Other times, me, for example, like sitting down and creating the framework and timeline and meetings rhythm for our budgeting process. I need to sit down and have a chunk of time to just do that. And that is what is going to enable everyone else to be wildly successful. I really try to use that sort of filter and try and think about like, what are the things that are on my list that I uniquely can do? So no one else is, based on their roles and responsibilities, no one else can do it. And if I don't do it and it doesn't happen, it's going to, be damaging, or, at least not be sort of elevating for the whole organization. But, when it comes down to it, if I look at how I spend my weeks, more time goes to people than to stuff that I need to do. And I never doubt that, because, our staff is the most important way that we drive positive change in the world. So, and I can't squeeze in staff stuff on a Saturday morning, whereas I can, if I need to, write my letter to the board, or, my quarterly report to the board, or, do whatever thing I need to do. So I do feel like, I'm always going to sort of elevate what I need to do for staff, and then build in time. In a best case week, it all sort of, balances out, and it doesn't require that sort of extra time. But that's sort of how I, think about it. And again, it comes back to that one thing question, like, what's the most important thing that I can do such that everything else is easier, no longer necessary? I mean, I apply that, again, not just to my stuff, but that I can do so that everyone else's work is made easier or better or clearer or something like that. So, it's ultimately, whether it's me doing stuff or me directly working with staff, it's all in service of creating those conditions for our organization to flourish, which means our staff are kind of unleashed to be their best working selves.
Absolutely love it. And listening to you, one reminder to the audience who's listening right now is you need to create space for reflection. And I would say, personally, for me, it needs to be on a day-to-day basis. Some people prefer it to be every second, every third day. But for me, if I don't create this 20, 30 minutes, and I like to do it at the end of the day, the last thing I do when I finish my working time is going to be 20, 30 minutes in which I'll first of all reflect, what have we done today as a team? What have we achieved? Is there some new opportunities? Is there some challenges? And based on that, what are the most important results? As you said, what's the one thing that we as a team need to get done tomorrow, and me as a leader need to get done to make sure that my team performs? And just having this space, creating this space and making it a habit. And I don't know if you heard some of these, Kate, but I work with many organizations. Usually there's always going to be one person on my workshops that will say, Stoyan, it's so great, but I don't have time to plan my time. We're so busy. So how do you like, oh, well, I'm just coming to work and I'm doing stuff. And these are leaders, these are executives. It's like, wow, how do you take the right decisions, what to focus on, if you don't have space for you to decide what to focus on?
Such an important point. And I get that, like, I just show up and I do stuff because there's always stuff like screaming at you. So I get that, like, it can feel tempting to just like plug right in and start responding to emails. And whenever I do that, it's like, no, like, that is not the way. Like, then you sort of feel like, it's like your day is not going right. So I love the idea of doing that at the end of the day. I'm usually like tired and hungry, and so it's not like a great time for me to do that. I do, I definitely do try and, like, I'll, at the end of the day, barring some, craziness on the home front, I'll, just do that, like, email scan, make sure, again, like, are there any, is there anything that a staff member needs or a member needs or something that I can, like, address promptly such that it makes their lives easier. Like, I do try and do that, like, buttoning up. And then I would say my reflection and kind of prioritization happens more like, I have a dog and we go for long walks together. And so at the end of the day, and then in the morning, so kind of both ends, that's when a lot of my kind of reflection and thoughts like settle out. And, it's when I can kind of percolate and, let go of stuff or whatever. But so I often, like, I think almost without even trying, a lot of that kind of reflection happens. And then for me in the morning is when I, sit down and, again, sometimes I get a little bit of this done at the end of the day, but mostly that's when I, like, look at my list, say, oh, this is the thing that has to happen first. And I got to make sure I get that out. And a lot of times, again, like, I'll know that coming into the day based on the prior day. But for me, the morning, using those, like, runs and walks and as a, just a way for a lot of stuff to kind of almost just naturally filter and organize and get clearer. And then I'll sit down, and before I dive into email, just, like, make sure I'm really clear on what needs to happen. And for me, that, like, list of being really clear is really important, because one of the things that's, like, become a really important skill for me is, my day has the the increments in which I can get stuff done are often super small. Like if I have a meeting that ends early, so I have 10 minutes between, this meeting and the next meeting, I need to know exactly what email is the most important one to do. And I'm pretty good at that. I like that I figured out how to, like, I get a lot of stuff done in like time blocks that effectively don't exist on my calendar, because it's like the 10 minutes here, the 5 minutes there. When you went to go get that phone cord right before we got on the phone, I was able to respond to a member request super quickly because I had chatted my team right before, and it was an urgent request that they had, and I was able to respond. So it's like knowing that that's the thing I need to do is super important. So,
The power of making lists. The power of making lists. I think it's so underutilized. Another great person from the network of 15 seconds, by the way, a great conference where Kate and I, we are part of the network of the 15 seconds. But another great person who was also a speaker there, Mark Harrison. I had him on the podcast. It's one of the first episodes, actually. He's the CEO of the T1 agency based in Toronto. And ask him, how do you stay on top of your game? He said, people don't want to hear that, but the only thing you got to do is you got a piece of paper, you make a to-do list at the beginning of the day, and then you review it at the end of the day. Everybody's looking for the best app, for the best software, start with building the habit, right? Like, create this space for yourself, make a list. From this list, what are the most important results? Some people say, today I need to focus on sales. Yeah, but what's that mean? What exactly is the concrete, tangible result you want to produce today? And what's the simplest, easiest, most efficient way to get it done? If you don't have this analysis, you're most likely going to procrastinate, waste time, and not be effective. And you, Kate, as you are the leader of the organization, there's so many things that depend on you, right? And this is actually something I'm also curious to hear. How do you manage all these, stakeholders, decisions? Probably there are some days that I'm just guessing, but everybody is a human, right? Like that you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling, I don't know how to handle all this. Like, how do you manage the days that are very difficult, and maybe you're overwhelmed, but you need to take some important decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely am very human. So I, not only do I get overwhelmed, I make mistakes. I don't, for my team who may or may not be listening, like, I know I sometimes do stuff inadvertently, but I do stuff that doesn't necessarily make your jobs easier. That's not my intent, but I'm human. Like, I do that. I'm still on the learning journey. So I definitely have days where I'm like fully aware of all of those ways in which I am less than perfect. And I think couple of the things that are most important for me, one is like making sure that I, continue, like, for me, like, get up in the morning and get some exercise, have the things that I do that I know, keep me healthy, keep me balanced. So like doing that. And then, secondly, always operating with a full awareness that I'm part of a team. So sometimes the way that shows up is, being, super transparent and going to someone and saying, like, I'm sorry, like, I forgot to send that email, or, I did X, Y, and Z that didn't, that made your life harder. And I apologize for that. Like, let's talk about how to move forward. So like owning what I need to own, if there's something that I need to own, and, being part of a solution. Other times it's just, being like, all right, team, like, I'm having a rough day. Like, can, so-and-so, like, can you help me out with this? Or like, I'm having a hard time figuring this out. Or can I share this with you and talk it through? And when I say team, it's like, all right, my staff members, it's board, like the board is, super supportive. So I'm a big fan of like, use your resources, and talk to people. And I feel like there's so many people who, when I've needed support or, insight or advice, they've been there. And I don't have a lot of ego involved in what I'm doing. So I'm really like, I love, asking for advice or receiving advice or getting feedback or like realizing like, oh, it'd be much better for 1% for the planet if I got better at doing this. And so, just really kind of tapping into all of that and embracing that as part of the journey is really important.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing this. I think another such a great reminder. I think I was check my Instagram in the morning. I think somebody was sharing something like one of these memes about that you need to ask for help, and it's okay. It's a strength. It's not a weakness to be vulnerable and to say, "Hey, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with this. I need your help. What do you think?" Just having this humility to ask people for advice, to ask for help, no matter what is their role in the organization. That this is such a great reminder. And a question that I really wanted to ask you is, my team right now, the three main values are, one of them is productivity and results, as you can imagine, perhaps. Another one is well-being and caring. We really put people first. We want to take care of the well-being of the people, mentally, spiritually, physically, in any certain way. And then it's growth mindset and positivity. Right. So these are the three values. But something that I'm really curious to hear from you about is, I mean, productivity and results doesn't always come together with well-being and team, right? Like sometimes you need to get things done. Sometimes you need to reach a deadline. But then again, you want to take care of the team and the well-being, and I'm just curious to hear, where do you think is the sweet spot between having this performance-driven culture, because results are important, productivity is important, at the same time to take care of the well-being of everybody in any possible way? How do we find this balance as leaders?
Yeah. I mean, it's such an important question. This past year, I would say it was a central question for us because, this time last year when we were kind of in the midst of kind of figuring out what it meant to be in a pandemic, we still thought like business could get pretty tight and pretty hard. So we were not hiring. We were like really focused on like maintaining our staff. But then we kept doing really well, which for us means bringing on more members. So the convergence of like making what I think was the appropriate decision, like to not sort of actively grow our hiring at a time when things could have gone south, and really focus on like, we want to support our existing staff. And, this is when, you're reading about more layoffs every day and things like that. But then as we grew, by the fourth quarter, we had some really overworked staff because we, had grown a lot. We hadn't, invested in the hiring. And so then the kind of intersection of that was staff members managing a ton of accounts and really feeling the burden, and that like, cut across the organization. And so that was really hard because, and then back to what you were asking about purpose, it's like performance when you're doing it for a mission, is even heavier because you feel like you don't want to let members down. You don't want to let your team down. You don't want to let your nonprofit, there's so much burden on that. So it's really hard. And I felt, I carried that heavily because I felt badly, and you can't just like wave a magic wand and like suddenly make it go away. So, we did in 2021 and in the budget we built last year, we have invested in hiring. So we've hired 6 new people already this year, which has made a huge difference. But really, it was hard. And there's like, there was no like really clear right way to handle that other than like, receiving that information, supporting those team members in every way possible while still knowing that there was, loads to carry. And then like really clearly engaging those teams in, an understanding of like, here's what we're investing in for hiring. And so, So that, that's a tough one. And I would say that for us is the place where we're going to always have to be really mindful of that, because as a nonprofit, like, we never have, excess capacity. So figuring out how do we get to the place where we aren't creating that really negative intersection of definitely not enough capacity for a growing network. And, we're making really good progress towards that, but it's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on because I feel a huge responsibility for that.
Right. I mean, you got to get the results because this is the purpose. This is so much impact depends on the results that are being produced, and results means people need to be focused and get things done. And sometimes people are, specifically the last 18 months, 16 months, I don't know how many now, but like with this pandemic, people being stuck at home for long periods of time, mental health issues. Of course, we want to be empathetic and we want to let people to really be taken care of in any possible way. So that means let them have a day off when they don't feeling well. Call them and say, how you're feeling, what can I do for you, how can I be there for you? But also keeping an eye on that, hey, there's like a big purpose that we need to be. So that's a very interesting topic to and I guess there's never a balance, and it comes down to attracting the right people.
Yeah. And like managing them with integrity too. Because I think, thinking about what you're just saying about like, reaching out and giving a day off and things like that. And I think our organization has done a good job of that. We have a good paid time off program. This time last year, we gave people a week off in July. So we're just like, no one's taking vacation. Like, we're just going to close things down. Like, everyone just needs to take some time. And that was great because then people felt like they weren't kind of bailing in a busy time. And, so I think doing all of those things, and we did a lot of other things, and our team, our people and culture team has been really great at sort of thinking about the different things that we can do just to provide that lift and support. What I often am spending more time thinking about is, and those are super important. So, it's a both and. So, and what I'm thinking about is the structural stuff. And so I feel like I've needed to be really transparent. Like this time last year, I was feeling like, I don't know if anyone's going to join 1% for the planet as the world turns, reading the economic news every day. It's like, I don't know. So I want to support the staff that we have. I don't want to lay anyone off. So I'm going to be conservative in how we manage our resources so that I can commit to this staff for the long term. And then, flash forward to November, like owning, like I made that decision. And now I know that it's put us in a position where we are understaffed for the, size of our network. And so now, we need to move that forward and just being transparent about some of the structural stuff and then investing in the structural things that need to happen to, support. So it's that like micro and macro, to support people, I think is really important. Because I think if you just do the little stuff, which is important, but don't do the big stuff, the little stuff can start to seem a little empty.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for sharing all these things very honestly in a very humble way. And I want to spend the last 5-10 minutes just to hear more about actually the 1% for the planet as an organization, and if you can maybe lead us, because you've been a guest at the Leaders Who Care, the other podcast that I'm also a part of, and you shared a lot about the amazing purpose of the organization. And I think it's such a genius thing. Like, I don't know how to say it, but like the simplifying. Let me just see how did you guys set the mission? I want to read that, and I'm going to read it with we bring the mission of the organization. We bring resources and doers together to accelerate smart environmental giving. Could you maybe lead us through how does it work? And if some of the listeners are actually excited to hear how to join, what should they do to be able to join 1% for the planet?
Yeah. So basically the way it works is that in the context of our belief that environmental philanthropy is a really important way to drive change in the world, we've created a model that we started out just focusing on businesses, but we now include individuals as well, where members make a commitment to give their 1%. In the case of businesses, it's 1% of their revenues or sales. In the case of individuals, they identify what their 1% is. And then our team vets environmental nonprofits, and we have a pretty like broad definition of environmental, and we include those nonprofits that are sort of at that intersection of environment and justice. And so we're really, that's an important area of work for us. But we vet those nonprofits, and then we work with our members to identify like what's the giving strategy that's going to be most meaningful for them. In the case of businesses, like what's the giving strategy that's going to move philanthropy either into your organization for the first time or from the like edge of your organization, from this like nice thing to do at the end of the year to something that's like core to how you have purpose, how you operate, how you solve business problems. And then, so we have that relationship. We work with our members on that, and they decide ultimately who they want to give to. They make those gifts directly, and we certify that giving. So any member that has the 1% for the Planet logo, every single year they've given their 1% because we've certified it. And it's really amazing to see, how members will, just bring giving into their company in ways that like is really powerful for their brand storytelling, and we support that as well. It's really, powerful for the impact they're creating. They address issues, things like that. So, we welcome members, and we do now have enough staff to manage members. So just to my point earlier, like we are, in a great position. Our team does such an excellent job of providing support to our members. And it's pretty easy. If you go to our website, you can click on join. There's, different ways that you can get more information and then fill out a simple form, and our team follows up and we go from there.
That is amazing. And I listened to an interview that you had with one of the founders of 1% for the Planet. And I think when you ask him, what is your vision for the future for the next 20 years? He said, it's very negative if we keep on doing what we're doing. I'm wondering, because you are working with these organizations and you're in this area, and I think many people need to hear this. What are some of the most pressing challenges that we need to pay attention to? Could you maybe share some of the things that we really need to work on these days?
Yeah, I mean, at risk of making people feel overwhelmed, I mean, everything. But it does not need to be overwhelming because you can allocate your 1%, literally or figuratively. Like we believe everyone has a 1%, but, some of the pressing issues are water. So accessibility to clean water is a huge issue. And that is, clearly both an environmental and a social issue. You look at the American West, and, this has been going on for a while, but it's certainly going on now. Rivers are drying up, and aquifers are, lowering. So access to clean water, and you could tie that directly to climate change. Water, climate change, and all of its like effects. I was just reading an article this morning about insurance preparing for, different sort of severity of storm cycles in the Northeast of the United States where I live. All of these things touch down in different but very real ways all over the planet. The health of our oceans, huge issue. And all of these things are connected, which is why I say everything, not so much because it's like, well, everything is a problem, but more like if I talk about water, I'm actually talking about climate. I'm actually talking about habitat. Like it is all connected. And, what I believe is that we fight for and engage with what we love. And so figuring out like if there's a forest near where you live that you just love and it just means a lot to you, maybe you spent time there as a kid or whatever, maybe that's where you should focus your energy and just really use that as the place to channel your energy, because then that's going to give you energy back and you're going to be able to do those next things for our planet. But I think really figuring out what you love and then remembering it's all connected and that no one of us can do everything. So figure out how to be part of a community in what you're doing, because then you're able to do so much more. And the 1% for the Planet community is an amazing way to feel like you're part of something so much larger.
So everybody who's listening, who's watching us live, make sure to go to 1%fortheplanet.com, right? I'm saying
.org.
it right.
1%
.org,
.org.
1%fortheplanet.org,
Yeah.
and just see how you can join. Whether you're a business or your organization, or you are an individual who decides to contribute to find the causes that you care about the most, go check it out. Share the word, spread the word. Like that's what we're doing here also with Kate right now. It's an organization that so far, as I'm looking at the numbers, have contributed through creating the platform for, I think, over 3,000 organizations to contribute like 300 million to environmental causes. And as Kate said, we need to act now. We're behind time, actually. We're all behind time. So I'm super, super grateful, Kate, for having you today to share so many great leadership advice, productivity advice, and to give us just a little bit of a idea of what's happening in terms of our planet, our environment, and how we can support it. So thank you so much for being with us, with the audience of the Productivity Mastery. Do you have any maybe final message, final words that you would like to leave the audience with?
I guess the final word I would leave with is a great book that I read. It's about writing. It's called Bird by Bird, which is by Annie Lamott. And that's actually a motto of mine, because basically the story for that is that her brother was procrastinating on a book report that was about birds. And her father said, well, the only way you can do it is bird by bird. And I definitely think about that each day, because really all you can ever do is one thing at a time. And so being able to sort of know that if you're prioritizing and doing bird by bird, you're making progress. And we got to do that one day, and then we got to do it the next day, and then we got to do it the next day. But if you keep, working through that, you do make progress. So bird by bird, I guess I would leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Toy, and I'm here with Kate Williams from 1% for the Planet. Thank you for listening, and see you again at the next episode of Productivity Mastery.